that why male practitioners say that, because they didn't want to have like people essentially making their yoga space dirty, and they didn't want it not to be purified. And it's ridiculous because you're absolutely right. Yoga is amazing for period pains, and I'm really conscious about how I look after my body and what I do. So yoga is one of the things I'll do. I will go and do some cycling and stuff, but maybe I won't go and lift really heavy weights the first couple of days just because it makes me feel really tired. But I think we have to look back at why did this happen? And, men made rules about women's bodies for so many years and still do. I mean, think about it. What's been seminal in the last couple of weeks is that certainly in the UK, Scotland is going to provide free period products to schools, and now England's following suit. But we pay a tax on these things. Why are we paying tax on sanitary ware, which is an essential item, and we're paying tax as if it was a luxury item? And I find this incredibly patriarchal and kind of ridiculous because it's not a luxury item. We need it. And actually we haven't educated people to understand that. And there's still so many things around period pains and work and stuff, and I have people just don't talk about it. And some women are debilitated with these pains or whatever's happening around that, and so for them to go to work, they can't even say anything. It's not built into our structure. And
there are lots of signs that this is changing, but not as fast as it should. And I'd say that it's certainly when I speak to younger people and they're like in their teens and 20s, they're much more open, men and women, about periods, menstrual health, sexuality, and all of that. And I think that's forcing older people, not in like from 30 plus, to start to change their attitudes. I want to talk a little bit about your cancer diagnosis and how that changed your period, because I know some cancer patients, they go into medical menopause, and I wondered, was that your experience?
So I have had a bit of both. So it depends on your cancer. So firstly, I had breast cancer, which was very hormone related. So basically it grows in response to estrogen and progesterone. So what happens in those cases, which is a lot of women, is they want to give you something that will reduce the amount of estrogen in your body or stop your ovaries from producing estrogen. So they're two different kind of things. One is by taking Zoladex, which is an injection. The other one is taking a tablet like tamoxifen. I have avoided Zoladex for a long time. I have an appointment on Friday where I'm sure we're going to have the conversation yet again. But I have had tamoxifen, and it has stopped my periods because it's an estrogen blocker. And it is interesting because it's such a part of being a woman. It feels very different. So part of it is like, oh, great, I can just do whatever I want to do. I can swim all the time. But actually, blocking your estrogen, not having estrogen, changes your mood, changes how your body works, changes how your brain works. Also increases your risk of so many diseases and things like that. So whilst it does help you when you're in medical menopause to reduce your risk of having breast cancer again, or certainly any hormone-dependent cancers, it does change so much of your body. And I think this leads us kind of back to menopause, where, again, it just happens to half the world, and we haven't been talking about it until the last year or so, which I find amazing because women are such an integral part of our society and our workforce now, and we're not actually allowing them the space to understand the menopause and work through it and make allowances for some of the really big changes that happen in your body. Again, as a cancer patient, when you go through medical menopause, people just think, oh, you're being a little bit difficult, you're being hot or something like that. But it's so debilitating, like some of the side effects. So for me, the hot flushes were one thing, but I had some of the rarer side effects, including you just seem to have a very, very, very sore and dry vagina and other parts, vulva. And it's something that we're starting to talk about. It happens in normal menopause too, but because this happens really suddenly, I was in absolute agony and I literally couldn't walk or do anything, to the point where I can't take this drug anymore. And so not only do your periods stop, which is, a small thing, but it's actually, why do they stop? It affects all your hormones because it's blocking your estrogen. And for me, it just ended up being, both times I tried it, because I've had breast cancer twice, it hasn't been something I could actually tolerate for more than a few weeks at a time. because it's so painful. And we've still not really researched or found a cure to help women with these side effects. And it's something I talk about. I'm sure if it had been for men, like Viagra, we discovered it quite quickly, but because it's for women, the research hasn't been there. And, lots of women go through medical menopause with different types of cancer because of chemotherapy can just also stop your ovaries from working and things like that. But there's so many other reasons, and we're not really still researching what we can do to help. And every time I go to a conference, I was at a conference for younger women in breast cancer last year, they were talking about how there was such a rare occurrence in younger women because they stopped the hormone treatment. And I kept putting my hand up after every single lecture I spoke and said, but you're not helping us with the side effect. I mean, I know I can do for myself, and I work in nutrition and lifestyle medicine, but even then, there's very little. You're insisting that we keep on these drugs, and I totally understand why, but actually, it's much harder for younger women, and you're not helping us. And we're finding it really difficult, both emotionally and physically.
What was the response of your doctor when you went to them and talked about the side effects you were experiencing?
So my own GP this time round, I have a female GP who's absolutely phenomenal, who used to actually work in AIDS research and so has had some experience of women who've had AIDS treatment having exactly the same side effects because they suddenly go into menopause too. And so she had loads of ideas of things to help me, including taking some vaginal estrogen pessaries and creams and all sorts and just the conversations and just actually listening to me. And that was amazing. The previous time, they just all seemed really baffled that this was a side effect. I did end up seeing a gynecologist at Chelsea and Westminster, but again, we kind of agreed that let's just stop it and we didn't know what to do. I think I'm very knowledgeable about hormones and how our body works, so I have a little bit more say in my own treatment with my cancer. And so it has been a little bit easier to have those conversations. I'm also quite strong-willed, so if I'm not doing something because it's making me feel horrible, that I'm not doing it. And I can explain why I'm not doing it and what kind of. But I think for a lot of women, suffer in silence. And I was at an event on Tuesday about medical menopause and the side effects for younger women with a charity called Trek Stop. And, so many women had no idea that there were things that could help them. They could take some forms of HRT, or they could take some of these creams or patches and things like that. And I think, again, we need to start educating them. And we need to talk about these things. And if we shroud it in secrecy, and again, don't talk about how it impacts our society and our workforce and women, then we're not going to be able to help them.
What do you think your experience of being in medical menopause will do for your eventual journey into perimenopause and menopause?
I think I'm a little bit understanding of how difficult it might be and preempting that I'm going to need some support around this. I'm also conscious that a lot of things that can help people through perimenopause and menopause may not be suitable for me just because I've had an estrogen-dependent type of cancer. But I'm also conscious there are people who are interested in this and talking about it. And there's things that we can do from a nutrition and lifestyle medicine perspective. So at the moment, I'm spending a lot of time researching and understanding the estrogen system. We have an estrogen detoxification system in our body. So perhaps it's for me and my body, it's not all about removing the estrogen from my body, but it's about helping my body and supporting my body to naturally detoxify that estrogen and go through that system. What's really interesting about the perimenopause and menopause is that we've not talked about this to women. When do we get it? We've never ever talked about this in school. So we're able to talk about periods and stuff. We've never educated girls to understand what menopause is. We sort of just say you have menopause and your period stop, but we've never really educated. So maybe that's an area where now I know that's on the curriculum now. That will make a difference to women. For my own personal journey, I'm just conscious from now on, being in my 40s, that perimenopause may happen soonish. I don't know when I would go into natural menopause because my mum had breast cancer too, and she had chemotherapy and suddenly went into menopause from having her period and being actually quite normal. So we don't actually know what the natural age of my mum having menopause is, and that's really the biggest indication for when you would have menopause. So I'm really interested to see what happens in the next kind of 10 years.
It's interesting that you're talking about a mix of HRT and also nutrition and lifestyle interventions. And I think that's actually really positive to hear, because in the conversations about menopause, they're very dominated right now. HRT, HRT, HRT. And I do find it frustrating. And that's not just because I am a holistic nutritionist. It's because I just know that HRT isn't, it's a solution, but it's not the only solution.
It's not the only solution, but from my perspective, when I think about the side effects of the body not having estrogen, how it increases your risk of cardiovascular disease, affects your brain, so you're not working so as well, you have brain fog, and all the other different risks, and osteoporosis, things like that. I do think I kind of want HRT just to continue, for my own health. But I agree. I think there's so many things. So one of the things I wrote about last year is that there's been some research that the Mediterranean diet, so diet full of vegetables and fruits, legumes, a little bit of dairy, lots of kind of fish, can actually help to delay our menopause by up to 3 years. Delaying our menopause is actually healthier because it means our body has estrogen for longer, and we reduce these risks of having cardiovascular disease and osteoporosis. But also, when we reduce our estrogen, we also become a little bit more insulin resistant. We're already becoming more insulin resistant as we get older, particularly if we're putting weight around our kind of midriff area, which often happens as our estrogen levels decrease. And so if we can help people by eating a little bit more differently, then that will make a difference to their long-term health. So it will help because hopefully they'll help not put on so much weight by putting on that fat in the midriff area because if we're insulin resistant, then we're going to process our food in a slightly different way. And so insulin is not going to work as well. So we are more likely to store extra food as body fat. So by understanding that helps hopefully for us to understand how to eat. Also, we need lots of fiber to help detoxify estrogen from our body. And it helps our gut health and everything anyway. And having these kind of legumes and things, we know that there's so many good things for heart health, for our, there's lots of good protein in them. There's lots of really good fiber. So maybe it's about doing a little bit more research to understand how that's going to help our bodies. I think that having a slightly lower carb diet can help some women. And again, we're looking, and I think it's, again, that works again with our insulin resistance. And I wrote about this a couple of days ago. So maybe it's just understanding this a bit more, because it's not something I don't think that, so doctors aren't really educated in menopause. That's the other thing. I find it quite scary that lots of GPs aren't trained in menopause. Unless your GP is a specialist menopause certification, they may not know that much, even if they're women. And given that half of the population are women and will go through menopause, I find that quite terrifying. So why isn't nutrition, why isn't menopause part of the general GP training, given that it's important to everybody and menopause is going to affect half their patients?
It's actually quite frightening sometimes what you hear secondhand about what GPs have said about menopause. So I was working with someone last year, and her GP said to her, perimenopause isn't real. It's not a real thing. Yeah.
Oh my God.
And that's actually not the first time I had heard that. And it was only when I got her to do some tests, and then she went to her GP with the test results and said, well, actually, this is what my tests are showing. And the GP was like, oh, actually, this might be perimenopause. So, but then it started being a conversation about HRT. And, HRT is fine, as I said, but I think there are other things, because this client was so young, that could have been done first. So that education piece is so important. And I know that you're involved in a lot of campaigning. Have you done any campaigning around more education for GPs within this area?
Not in the menopause areas yet. It's something I am constantly talking about, though. You have to pick and choose the campaigns that you do. But one of the things I have talked about is I would love doctors to learn more about nutrition. So I'm really supportive of an organization called NutriTank, who are trying to get nutrition onto the curriculum, for medical school. Obviously the same with Culinary Kitchen and, Dr. Rupi. So there's definitely that. As far as menopause, for me, it was really getting my head around. I didn't really realize that doctors weren't educated until I've started investigating it for myself and trying to help women with particularly with medical menopause, because I work with a lot of cancer patients.